Hello there, this is Oliver Dillon Stout. Right now we are looking at the assignment ParticleFun for the class SGD213. Alright, so I made two versions of this, one that I actually liked a little bit more, which was less complicated, and the one that I will present initially, which is going to have even more of our parameters, since the goal of this assignment wasn't to make something perfect so much as it was to test out as many of the tools as we have available in the particle system. So as you can see on our right below the particle system, we've got emissions and shape as well as renderer, like usual, selected. We've also added trails. I added a light in an attempt to display the color a little bit better. I will go over that in a bit. I was not quite able to get control over the color gradients the way I wanted to, and I will try to analyze why that might have come up in just a moment here with you. So if we open up particle system, you'll see we've got a duration of 5 seconds. We also have it looping, and essentially, what I went for initially was to imagine that, let's say this, similar to the YouTube video, suggests that we have something I like to imagine similar to the output behind maybe like a space motorcycle, something that's hovering. So I didn't really want to utilize colliders because I suppose the way I envisioned it is that we wouldn't be that close to the ground at any point. So if you see my mouse here, we have a few different changes that I'll show you a little bit further on down the line. Um, that is going to basically make a vortex that spins, and then as it gets to this point, it's going to slow down. We're going to use the z-axis to have, I believe it was drag, which I'll show you in a moment. But let me display our animation real quick. So the difference with the second one is that we've added all these sharp moving additions to, I believe, our emitters. We have a nice little bit of randomness so that it's not just a blob with nothing behind it typically. There's our randomness kicking in again. We also have color added to the particles as well as the trails. I'll show you the gradient that I was going for, and you can see some of those colors displayed. I think I'd have to continue tweaking them to actually get um, the gradient is usually what I use when I'm painting fire. So I was hoping to have more yellows, oranges, um, and a range of reds viewable through both the particles and the trails, but in the end we mostly have shades of red to gray on the particles, and then our trail has like this yellowish to gray um, gradient. So that was a little bit confusing for me. As you can see, we've got our start color. I've got it, I believe, going from yellow to there's a light gray in the end. I believe this is beginning to end based on that being the way most things are structured in the Western world, left to right. So the other parameters we set, we've got x, y, and z set to 4. Now, I believe this is scale. If we were to change all these to 1 and then run our program, if I say enter, let's make sure we save, just because, once again, I'm not certain, so I'm so sorry if this is a waste of time when I do that step while you're watching this. Alright, so if we shrink these, we're going to have some very small particles. So we amp those up to being a scale of 4. Alright, and we're going to actually reset that just so that as we make changes through this video, we can see the individual changes one at a time. Alright, so moving on from there, the start speed and the start lifetime, um, let's do a display of if we had 5 here alone, and I'll say enter, file, save project. Sorry about that again. So if you see, the output here is going to be quite a bit different. So you can still see our vortex, and it looks pretty cool, but we're not getting nearly as much distance before it stops. We didn't adjust the drag at all, but what we did do here is that start speed is basically kicking it further out. And as you can see, this cone actually changed sizes when we did that. If I were to make this 70, for example, that cone, as you can see in our viewport, just changed sizes on us. That was not a surprise, but that does indicate that the output is going to be quite different. So here we're going to do a 70 start speed. And as you can see, everything is flying much further away, much faster. In fact, we'd have to change the camera's location for this to really stick. So since the camera's in the right location for that, we're going to leave that as is. Start lifetime. This is set to 8.4 right now. Let's set it to 30. File, save, project, and play it. Alright, so we've got our trail. It's actually very broken up, and to some degrees a little bit cleaner here. It seems to be going completely off camera though, and I'll show you. Alright, so now we've fully loaded the difference. So now you can see that there's a huge gap in between each one. That first one was just the game engine probably adjusting for that parameter change. I could wait in here and eventually it would re-trigger it, but again, we're looking for almost a consistent output. So we're gonna do 8.4. I think you can already assume if I were to change that to a lower number, we would have more output at a faster rate. The duration of 5, this gives us a end of life, essentially, to the what we are getting out of the burst emissions. All right, so if we look at rate over time, this one was pretty important. If I were to change this to the opposite, like this, which I did actually test quite a few different ways while, sorry, we will skip that for now, while adjusting the different parameters. So I've got 7 minutes with you so far on this video. Okay, so what we're seeing in that situation right there is quite a bit different of a change in our output. I'll run this one. I'm just interested if this is going to work without doing the saving each time, so let's test it. So now we're getting a slight trail ahead of our burst, which is quite interesting. But again, that's not quite what we were going for. So essentially, this is going to dictate the order of events for us in which the emission occurs. All right, we've got rate over distance. So the emissions will start at a rate of 0 and then become 10 over time. Let's change this to something crazy like 90 and view the difference. So essentially, the same way that I approach this is the exact same way that I approach working in the software Resolume. It's a lot of effects that you throw on top of other clips, made specifically for a live audience situation, be it PowerPoint on steroids for a presentation speaker or what I use it for, which is typically concerts. And you just go through all the parameters, you test each one, you find your favorite looks, you set presets, and this reminded me a lot of that. So rate over distance, the emission, it was subtle. I believe that the emission is increasing greatly instead of casually. I believe we had that set to just 10. So I'll return that to what it was. It's not changing our output a ton, but tweaks like that are going to be much more important when you're doing something professionally for, let's say, an explosion for a movie scene. All right, bursts. Without bursts, I found this to be a little bit boring, or at least that's like almost the most important part to me initially. So we have bursts. I've got the time set to 1. The count is set to 50. So the count and the cycles were pretty important. The interval I changed just slightly. The probability we did not adjust. So with this set to 300 count rather than 50, we will get a lot more output. I can tell you that much immediately. So as you can see, we are extremely dense. It actually looks pretty cool. I thought it would be too jumbled, but I believe that there's a lot of power in negative space used properly. Um, and I do like the gaps where you can see in between different sections. So if I change that back to 50, and we change the cycle to 50 rather than 10. Now, we are going to get, I believe, quite a few more of these. Um, so it basically lengthened all of our spikes with that first one. So now we have a small burst and then a longer burst. And I believe this parameter would be easier to see in a less complicated scenario. All right, this is more so the result I expected. So again, the game engine's still catching up, but we're getting more bursts per minute. We just had 3. And this is actually pretty cool. I don't even mind this adjustment. So if you can bear with me, why don't we keep these cycles to 50? It looks less clean and controlled, however. I do believe that made an interesting adjustment. At the end of this video, I will show you my favorite settings. I'll do that extremely briefly since this video is probably going to go on to be 20 minutes. I will try to speed up the rest of the way through this. So we chose the cone shape. I believe that was the default shape anyway. We adjusted the angle and the radius until I had it basically giving me the direction that I wanted to have it. The arc 360. This right here, actually, instead of playing it live, I should have, pardon me. Let me see. So we'll just do play on some of these, just since our camera's not too far off from the rendering camera. So if I were to, again, go down to arc, make this 0, and play it. So we've got a really nice twist to it. It's quite beautiful, actually, but we aren't getting the arc that I want. And what that is going to look like in comparison. So I believe the arc, when I initially messed with it, was producing a curve that if I max it out, for example, to 1260, and we say play. This was actually generating, and maybe you can see my mouse here, but it was generating a curve. I believe the drag settings that I have later on, these rotation in the X, the Z, I believe these adjustments are some of the parameters that are actually keeping that from going. So 270 and 588. So if I do 0, I believe we will lose our vortex. And if I don't have this set to anything, Sorry, I should probably pause this before we crash. So as you can see, those two parameters are changing a lot for us. Now we just have a tornado in the middle of the air. I'm not saying it's the worst thing ever, but it's definitely not our goal. So believe it or not, these parameters right here, and even this one right here, if I say 0, actually changed almost the majority of our entire outcome. We definitely have some cool other adjustments. However, these were what created that vortex the way I initially set it up. So I spent a lot of time in here working on this section. 360, this was 5.88. Come on, baby, don't crash. If it crashes, I'll just pause this. 5.88. Is this still trying to play right now? It must be. I'm sorry. Please pause. Pause. Okay. And what was this? 270, I believe. Okay. And once that loads, we should. No, not 2. I need 270, please. Thank you. All right. And look how quickly we've just changed back to our vortex with a bunch of different bursts. So still got the vortex. You can see it spinning within itself. I actually found that to be a much more peaceful look when I was working on this in a less advanced adjusted setting. Randomized direction was important so that there's some negative space and they're not all in a single line together. And then the burst spread. This is my favorite. I just had to mess with the different results. I think you understand how that works enough for me to not describe it. The length is locked in at 5 right now. Emit from the base, so I wanted to emit from the bottom of the particles. They are leaving, so the trail should be hanging out behind the direction at which we're going. And we're not even in trails yet. So at 16 minutes, again, I'm going to try and speed this up. I messed with as many parameters as I could, though. So we are now looking at velocity over time, orbital x and y were adjusted. This is where we have the speed modifier. So if I were to disable velocity over time, all right, so you can see our result once again is very different, and that 360 arc now is actually displaying a good bit more of what it functions as if we didn't have the velocity over time adjustment. So if I enable that again, I should have paused. My apologies. All right, so what if we were to get rid of this and say 0? All right. So this is the linear y. So we still have our vortex. We don't seem to be um, going as far in the direction that we want our trail or our particles to end in. But most of this is related to controlling a, not quite a stopping point, but over time, where are those particles going to be? And again, the goal being, yes, the vortex, but this more specifically relates to wanting the particles to end up in the same location, slowing down at the end, kind of circling until they dissipate. And right when they dissipate, with my favorite animation, the next one was landing right in the area that it just dissipated. And that seemed to be the perfect balance for me. This was, just to speed this up, just a bit of adjusting for all of these until I found what I was looking for. So if we go to limit velocity of lifetime, we are dampening by a tiny bit over time. We also have a speed of 7. That's the speed at which we are going in tandem with some of our particle system general settings. If I change the speed to 1, come on, and play it, you'll see we're not going very far compared to usual. Alright, so for the sake of time, I'm going to change that back to 7 just so we can see the other individual adjustments that are most important. Um, so we have lifetime by emitter. We set a specific slope to this, and then the speed range, lifetime emitter speed over time. Let's say I set this to 0. So again, this will relate to the lifetime of the emitter specifically. So I suppose we won't see this as well until we were to go in and actually play this again. I'm trying to balance time and displaying it. However, the light being emitted by these particles would be basically not increasing, but decreasing over time. I'll change that back to about 7. So, you know what, actually, before I do that, let me check and see if this is the issue I've been having with my gradient, because this is one of my theories, is that this would be the issue that I'm facing. So let's go ahead and see what this does to our gradient. You know what, so far, it didn't fix what I was hoping for. So, that's part of the game. I don't want to waste too much time on that. Essentially, that is what I'm still trying to figure out, is maybe one of these ramps would work better than another one. So, I'm gonna make it constant. Let's see if that changes anything. But anyway, force over lifetime. Here we go. This is how we have the Z, actually, the 2.24 is so important because without that, um, we're not gonna have our emitters basically stop and try and like go back in the direction they came from at the end. They're gonna kind of just keep going and going and going. They still slow down a tiny bit at the end, but to get that timing the way we really wanted it, let's say I amp this up to 8, you'll see a drastic difference. And so this out of the force over lifetime parameters was the most important. I had to tweak the X and Y a tiny bit, but that was very use case specific, and honestly, it was just about throwing in numbers to find the right amount. So 2.44 seemed to be what worked for us. But as you saw when we did 88, that Z will pull us in the opposite direction. Okay. Color over lifetime, same gradient. I saved it as a preset. I just love working with that color spectrum, especially for something like this. The speed range, 0, 1, color by speed. Let's go ahead and ignore that and see if this one might just be causing our issues. Again, I triggered, and you know what? There it is. That's so much better. Alright, so our reds look nicer. I'm not going to say everything does. To be honest, I probably wouldn't have adjusted color over speed if it wasn't the goal of this assignment to um, basically try to adjust every parameter that you could to make something better. So I'm actually going to leave that undone. That's the closest we've been to what I was hoping for. Alright, now we added some noise. This is pretty important in the sense of breaking up the cleanliness of the particles. We didn't want the particles to look like perfect solid objects, and here we have full 100% density particles in comparison to before. So we wanted to set the noise up a little bit just to break that up. If we made the strength way stronger and the frequency much higher, it's actually going to shrink it. So let's actually make it lower. I don't want to make all of these adjust just because that could cause me to forget one of the parameters and make the rest of this video not quite clean. I will speed this video up slightly for you so that you can watch it at a faster rate. I know I'm talking kind of slowly through most of this. Alright, so I think we see the difference there. We do want our noise. It's just changing things up. The larger this is, the more obvious each noise impact is going to be. 2.5. See, I did not quite remember the settings we had. I think it was more like 4. Alright, so lights. This was just an attempt to, we used a spotlight. Couldn't use a directional light, I believe, or a world impacting light. So we needed a spotlight for this. The ratio is 0.7. I really didn't utilize this too much, and I don't want to waste any time on it. It was just an attempt to see our image better. Now, trails was important, extremely important, and I'll open up render as well because we set up the trails right here, trail material, default particle, and material particles unlit. These cannot be the same. I'm not certain that trail material default particle is the best option. The trails look okay. The color result was not perfect. As you can see, we set it to particles. If we set it to ribbon, we'll have a much different result. I believe ribbon, yeah, it's going to be much bigger and denser, and that's not really particle-y looking to me. We also, if we were to get rid of the trails completely, we would obviously lose what's falling behind us. Texture mode, stretch. Let's run that real quick. Alright, so as you can see, we're getting much larger trail particle settings. So I am going to let you look at the render settings. This is going far too long of a video. I did want it to cast shadows, but we don't have any other objects in here, so that doesn't matter too much. Static shadow caster. And then sorting fudge and max particle size. Particle size is important for generating how big those would be. Camera scale, speed scale, length scale. Let's make the 0.2 real quick. That's going to change the length of our particles, I do believe. No, actually not. So anyway, some more to learn. I'm going to pull this down for 1 second, pause it, open up the other version that I liked a little bit more, and then close this out and speed up the video in Premiere Pro so that you don't have to listen for 30 minutes. Thank you. Alright, and here you can see a much more peaceful version. I like the particles still being circular and small, rather than those triangle, diamond-like shapes. I believe that's somewhat in the size parameters of one of the particle sections. I'd have to go back through completely to refine this, but to be honest, this was the most peaceful looking one to me. I wish these particles were slightly larger but still spheres, and that the trails had a better gradient, but this was the most peaceful result to me. Let me go ahead and run it in here, which should give you a reason why that just kind of hit the spot for me. So thank you so much for watching. Let me know if you have any questions. Again, I'm going to edit this so that my video is shorter for you, and hopefully my voice is not too ridiculous to listen to. But thank you for watching. I appreciate it.